Have you ever sat in a meeting with the perfect solution to a problem, but you waited just a second too long to speak, and then watched as someone else, maybe someone less qualified, blurted out the exact same thing and took all the credit? Or maybe you've spent hours polishing a project, checking it for the 10th time, while a colleague turned in a good enough version yesterday and is already moving on to the next big promotion. We often tell ourselves that if we just work harder, if we're just more prepared, and if we're just better than everyone else, the world will eventually notice. But there's a silent, invisible barrier that stops even the most talented people from reaching their peak. And it isn't a lack of skill. It's a lack of confidence. In their deep dive into the human psyche, authors Katty and Shipman explore a frustrating paradox in their work, the confidence code. They discovered that across almost every industry, there is a massive gap between how much we know and how much we actually do. We've been raised to believe that competence is the ultimate currency, but Kay and as Shipman argue that confidence is actually the engine that makes competence matter. Without it, your talent is like a high-performance Ferrari sitting in a garage with no fuel. It looks great. It's technically superior, but it isn't going anywhere. The first big idea that shifts the way we look at success is the competence versus confidence dilemma. We tend to think these two things go hand in hand, but the authors show us that they are actually distinct, and often they're in conflict. Imagine a seesaw. On one side, you have your skills, your degrees, and your experience. On the other, you have your belief in your ability to succeed. For many high achievers, particularly women, the skills side is weighted down heavily, while the confidence side is up in the air. Katty and Shipman point out that we often use competence as a shield. We tell ourselves, I'll apply for that job once I have one more certification, or I'll speak up once I'm 100% sure I'm right. But while we are busy perfecting our skills, others are busy taking action. The book suggests that the world doesn't reward the person who is the most right. It rewards the person who is the most certain. It's a bitter pill to swallow. But understanding this shift from being good to being bold is the first step in decoding why some people climb the ladder, while others feel stuck on the same rung. This brings us to the second major theme, which is the perfectionism prison. We often wear our perfectionism like a badge of honor, but in the confidence code, it's framed as a psychological poison. Think of perfectionism as a buffering icon on a video. You're trying to load the best possible version of yourself. But while that little circle is spinning, the rest of the world has already finished the movie. Kay and Shipman describe how the desire to be flawless actually prevents us from taking the very risks required to build confidence. When you aim for perfection, you aren't aiming for success. You're aiming to avoid failure. And if you're avoiding failure, you're avoiding growth. The authors suggest that confidence isn't the absence of fear or the absence of mistakes. It's the willingness to be messy. They challenge the good girl or good boy syndrome. The idea that if we just follow all the rules and never make a mistake, we will be rewarded. In reality, the confidence code requires us to break a few rules, embrace the B- work occasionally, and realize that a finished, imperfect project is worth infinitely more than a perfect one that never leaves your hard drive. But where does this confidence even come from? Is it something we're born with? Or can we build it? This leads into the third big idea, the biology of bravery. This is where the book gets really fascinating. As the authors look into genetics and brain chemistry, they look at things like the warrior gene and the role of hormones like testosterone and cortisol. They explain that some of us might be naturally wired to be more anxious or more cautious, Our brains have an amygdala, the fear center, that might be more sensitive than someone else's. However, and this is the crucial part, the confidence code emphasizes that biology is not destiny. They use the concept of neuroplasticity to show that we can literally rewire our brains through action. Imagine your brain is a forest. If you always take the path of caution, that trail becomes a highway. But every time you take a risk, every time you speak up despite your heart racing, you're hacking out a new trail. Eventually, that new trail becomes easier to walk. The authors make it clear that while we might start with different genetic baselines, confidence is ultimately a muscle. If you don't use it, it atrophies. If you work it out, it grows, regardless of your DNA. The fourth and perhaps most transformative theme is the action bias. Kay and Shipman argue that we spend far too much time ruminating, which basically just a fancy word for overthinking, until we're paralyzed. They describe rumination as a dark whirlpool of thoughts. You replay a conversation in your head, you worry about a future email, you analyze every possible what if. The antidote? Rapid, messy action. The confidence code is essentially a feedback loop. You act. You see that the world didn't end, and your confidence grows. Then you act again. It's not about having a sudden epiphany where you wake up feeling like a superhero. It's about doing the thing you're afraid of, while your hands are still shaking. The authors suggest that the secret to confidence isn't thinking positive. It's thinking less and doing more. When you move, you stop the whirlpool of overthinking from pulling you under. Now, while this book offers a powerful roadmap, we have to look at it through a critical lens. This is where we analyze the transformative aspect of the work. What Kay and Shipman get incredibly right is the identification of the internal barriers. They provide a mirror that reflects our own self-sabotaging habits back at us in a way that is hard to ignore. However, where the book might face some critique is in its heavy focus on individual change. By focusing so much on how individuals, especially women, need to change their internal code, does it let systemic issues off the hook? For example, the book talks about how being bold leads to success. But in many corporate or social environments, when women or marginalized groups act with the same boldness as their peers, they are often penalized or labeled as aggressive rather than confident. This is known as the likability trap. While Kay and Shipman do touch on the social pressures, a critic might argue that the book places the entire burden of change on the individual's shoulders, rather than questioning why the code of our society rewards certain types of confidence over others. Is the goal to teach everyone to play a flawed game better? Or should we be changing the rules of the game itself? It's a conversation worth having. Furthermore, some might find the heavy emphasis on action a bit simplistic for those dealing with genuine clinical anxiety. While neuroplasticity is real, simply doing the thing isn't always a viable cure for deep-seated psychological hurdles. That said, as a tool for the average person who feels stuck in their career or personal life, the advice is undeniably practical. So, what is the final verdict on the confidence code? This book is an essential read for the overprepared. Underachiever? If you have ever felt like you are your own worst critic, or if you feel like you are standing on the sidelines of your own life, watching more confident people take the lead, Katty Kay and Claire Shipman have written this for you. It's a wake-up call that tells you that your perfection is actually your prison, and your competence is only half the battle. It is a 4 out of 5-star guide that manages to bridge the gap between scientific research and actionable self-help without feeling too fluffy. If you want to take an actionable step today based on the confidence code, here it is. Commit to a micro risk. Today, Find one small thing that makes you slightly uncomfortable. It could be sending an email you've been over-editing, speaking up first in a meeting, or even just asking a question you're afraid might sound stupid. Don't wait until you feel confident to do it. Do it specifically because you don't feel confident. The goal isn't to succeed at the task. The goal is to prove to your brain that you can survive the discomfort of trying. Confidence isn't something you get. It's something you do. Thank you for watching this breakdown of the confidence code. Don't miss our next episode. We'll be looking at another game-changing book that might just change the way you see the world. See you in the next one.